So I wanted to make this video to talk about the psychology of successful people. And as someone who's had success in the various fields that I've been in playing football, having graduated from both Harvard and Oxford, traveling the world as a global public speaker, the biggest thing that I've realized is that success is a very abstract thing. And what does that mean? Because that itself is an abstract saying. But what you realize is that success is just the physical representation of what happens in your mind. And in a prior seminar, I talked about this exact thing, that your mind determines the trajectory of where you go in life and the outcome of the situations that you undertake. And in understanding your own mind, that is how you truly reach new levels of success. And in the conversations that I've had with multiple successful businessmen, with athletes, with people who have just done various endeavors around the world, they all say the same things. It's always about the principles that they have, the guiding stars that they have in their life. And none of it is about exactly what they did to become successful. People who have made hundreds of millions of dollars always talk about the principle of what they did. They never really stress about what exactly they did. And you could say, oh, they're gatekeeping information and they don't want you to know so you don't become successful. But I beg to differ, because I've employed a lot of these strategies and I've realized in looking back on the success that I've had that oftentimes it came from those exact same principles that they talk about. So what you find to be very interesting in the psychology of successful people is that a lot of the success that people see comes from some of the darkest places that they've been in life and some of the darkest emotions. And I recently did a short video talking about how there's no such thing as a negative emotion, which I completely believe in, because a lot of the success I've had in life has come from negative emotions that have fueled me. And I don't view that as a negative thing, because I was able to take those emotions and turn it into something good. And what I find is that when you study psychology and you talk to a lot of people, what you realize is that so many people are afraid of these so-called negative emotions. And in psychology, we talk about emotions of negative and positive affect, which are essentially opposite emotions. You could say anger and happiness, for example. One is negative and one is positive. However, what you realize is that when people define negative or positive emotions, they are not defining the emotion itself. They're almost always talking about the actual actions associated with the emotion. They define anger as being negative because people take their anger out in a negative way, or it stems from a situation that people did not like. Therefore, they tie the emotion itself to being negative, and they state that the emotion can only have negative outcomes, which is just not true. What you realize is that it is up to the person to appraise the emotion in the correct way and use it for good. So when I was in high school and I was being recruited by schools, I ended up having 19 Division I offers. And before I got any offer, and even during the times where I was getting offers, I was filled with a lot of anger. I had a lot of anger for how things were going in my life. I wasn't satisfied. And I chose to listen to those emotions rather than just write them off. And so when I listened to them, they pointed me towards self-improvement. They pointed me towards the things to work on that can make me a better athlete. They pointed me towards reaching out to people and being tenacious about what I wanted out of life so I could achieve it. And what you realize is from there, what was born is this great athletic career that I've had. Another great emotion that people always deem as being negative is depression. There were a lot of times where I felt truly depressed, where I felt like I was just on the wrong path. Nobody understood what I was doing. Felt like I just wasn't going to make it. I wasn't going to have success. And a lot of nights I only had myself and my own thoughts. And a lot of times I only had the dreams that I had. But I chose to listen to that depression. And what was it telling me? It was telling me that I was missing something that would have brought me fulfillment in life. And by listening to that, I was able to involve myself in greater things, involve myself in things that were greater than me, which then led to my success. So those are things that you can really think about in the emotional field, and how these emotions really impact people and how they actually help successful people. Successful people don't shy away from any emotion. In fact, they embrace them all because they all tell a story of exactly what you should be getting out of life. There was a good quote that was given to me by a friend, which says, emotions are like children, in the sense that they'll just tug on you and annoy you and yell and scream and kick until you give them the attention they want. And the attention, emotion specific, is to understand them. And so many people go through life without wanting to understand their emotions that they can't become successful. Talk to any successful person. I guarantee you they have complete control of their emotions. Now, the next thing that really helps successful people is a level of self-efficacy. I recently did another video talking about self-efficacy, which is the ability, or I'm sorry, it's the belief that you can accomplish what you are setting out to accomplish. And people who are successful have extremely high levels of self-efficacy. And the reason why that is important is because before they even attempt a task, they have already been pulling from memory other instances in which they completed a task. So therefore, when they start this one, they go in already believing that they can accomplish it, even if it's something completely unrelated to what they've done. And what I've realized is that in the journeys I've had, no matter what it was doing, when I got involved in research in undergrad, first time ever doing research, didn't know what I was going into, but I had prior memories of having success in football and having success in class and academics that really boosted me forward and increased my self-efficacy. So by the time I started doing research, I just knew I was going to be successful at it. And I ended up doing research at Harvard Business School, Stanford's Business School, UChicago Booth, so forth and so on, and plenty of other schools. Now, successful people build self-efficacy. They are always looking at life as accomplishing tasks. When you talk to successful people, they're almost always talking about what they can accomplish, long-term goals, how they can get more done. And what you realize is that they're not just saying stuff. It's not just abstract goals that they put on a sheet of paper. If you talk to a very hyper successful individual, they can tell you that almost everything they did that day, they tracked it. They woke up in the morning, they hit their goals. They made their bed, they did their morning routine. Why is that so important? In almost every successful book that you read, they always talk about a morning routine. They say, oh, well, I get up at this time, I brush my teeth, and I go read the paper, make my bed, make breakfast, go on about my day, and continue to go on their daily schedule. Now, why is that morning routine so important? People would say, oh, well, it's just good to have structure, and structure makes you more disciplined. And that's not necessarily why it's important. Having discipline is most certainly important, and having a daily routine is definitely going to increase your discipline overall. However, the reason why it's important is because it builds self-efficacy. They wake up every day, they do exactly what they plan to do, regardless of how they felt, regardless of what was going on in life, and regardless of everything else that was around them. They did it. So their brain is constantly saying, oh, I'm the kind of person who wakes up and does exactly what I said I was going to do. I wake up in the morning, regardless of anything that's going on, I always do it. So by the time they get to the difficult task or they get to the unknown, their brain's pulling for memories. What you have to understand is that in the brain, there's something known as the cognitive affective processing system, also known as CAPS. And what CAPS does is it pulls from prior memories your ability to do something. It pulls the emotion tied with it, and it also pulls the memory itself to then prime you for the upcoming task. So say you're about to give a speech, for example, and before you step on the stage, your brain is pulling from memories you giving other speeches. And in pulling those memories, it pulls the emotion attached to it, and it pulls your self-efficacy tied to it as well. And your brain will then postulate to you that you are good at public speaking if you have good memories to pull from. So what people need to know is that when you encounter a situation that you've never done before, your brain's going to pull from memories anything that it can that could be related to it. And oftentimes it's going to be something that's a bit more abstract. It's starting to pull from memories of you just stating that you were going to do something and then doing it. I have friends who have built their self-efficacy so high that they make statements like, this year I'm going out the country and I'm doing this. And almost every time they do it. Actually, every time they do it, they have not missed once because their self-efficacy is so high that by the time they say they're going to do something, their brain knows that they're going to get it done. And that ties into their subconscious. So then their subconscious dictates where they go, which brings me to the next thing about successful people. So when you talk to successful people, their subconscious guides them in a way that unsuccessful people's subconscious doesn't. So what I mean by that is this. Your subconscious acts as a guiding star. It essentially sits at the pinnacle of your brain and directs your movements and directs what you say to certain people and how you present yourself. And successful people always put at their subconscious success, but pulling from those prior memories, pulling from high levels of self-efficacy. So when they present themselves to other people, subconsciously, they're giving across all of the signals of being a successful person. So when they encounter new people and encounter new situations, they're never having to worry about whether they're going to present themselves well. They're never worrying about whether they're going to get the task done. When they're presented with something, they're never overwhelmed or hesitate before saying yes. They always believe that they can get the job done, no matter what. Now, the next and final thing about the psychology of successful people is that they almost never experience burnout. And it's not because they're not working hard. And a lot of people think that burnout stems from working too much. And that's not necessarily the case. Burnout stems from cognitive dissonance, which is the discrepancy between who you are and who you want to be, which causes this feeling of mental discomfort. And that mental discomfort drains people exponentially. What you find is that very successful people have been able to separate the work they do and their lives from the person that they are. And that makes a world of a difference, because once you've separated those two, you can be this sort of person regardless of what situation you're in. And the situation itself doesn't actually matter. So successful people want to be the kind of people who are doing a certain thing. And when they become that person, they're then able to take the job as a CEO. They're able to take the job as a sports professional. They're able to go into research like I did. They're able to just have all these different experiences without getting burnt out. So a lot of them view themselves as just being the hard worker, the problem solver, the person who gets things done. It ties back to self-efficacy again. Because when you become that person at the highest level and you believe you're that person, you're meant to be that person, then it doesn't matter what you're doing because you're always applying that principle to whatever you're doing. And successful people have this down to such a science that they don't think about it. When you talk to successful CEOs, they talk about, yeah, I never get burnt out because this is exactly what I was put on this earth to do. And they truly believe that with everything that's in them. So I tell people all the time, if you're fighting burnout, you need to actually look at yourself and the kind of person that you want to be. Because if you don't actually conquer that, you will always feel burnt out no matter what you do. There were times when I was playing football where I felt burnt out. I felt like I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I had no passion for it. And during those times, I had to really dig deep and say, okay, what kind of person do I actually want to be? Do I want to be the person who shows up regardless of how difficult it is or regardless of how I feel and actually do things? That's exactly the kind of person that I wanted to be. So I started to employ that mindset. And then I started to close the gap in cognitive dissonance. So who I wanted to be got closer and closer to who I actually was until eventually those overlined and overlapped each other and they became the same thing. So I became that person who showed up regardless. And then the burnout left and I was able to feel much more successful in what I was doing and find more success in general. And what you find is that when you start to view the world as abstract principles, you then can take on any task. And that's the biggest thing that successful people do. They don't view the world as just all of these different parts that come together. They view the world as abstract. They view the world as just principles. And they apply the same principles to every situation, which allows them to be so much more successful and allows them to do it at such a high level for such a long time. So I hope this video helps someone out. I hope you guys understand a bit more about how successful people think. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe and like and share with some friends. You can also follow me on all socials linked down below. And until next time, stay improving.